Welcome to the Gaggle, where we talk politics in Arizona and beyond. This week on a very special Gaggle, we look back at the biggest stories of 2017 and we look ahead to 2018 with some predictions. So let's get right to it. Yvonne, what do you think is the biggest political story of 2017?
Down at the state capitol, by far, I think it was the school choice, the ESA bill that Governor Doug Ducey and Republican lawmakers muscled through during a marathon day. These are highly controversial, but they made names for themselves nationally as being kind of ground zero for this program, which they're spreading across the country. There will be hell to pay for this if they keep these things in place, or there could be, at least politically. I think everyone's trying to figure out what the political calculations are going to be moving forward. I can also expect some Republicans, including the governor, to maybe recalibrate themselves on this issue. So our reporting, I think, had a lot to do with the referendum. For whatever your opinions are on this issue, I think that we really did have impact, and that's something I'll carry with me moving forward.
Excellent. Ron, what is your biggest story of 2017?
Well, you know, from the congressional perspective, it really seems like Arizona's senators made all kinds of news throughout the year. John McCain, of course, his very tragic diagnosis captivated the nation, and followed up shortly thereafter with a dramatic thumbs down on health care. And then Jeff Flake announcing from the well of the Senate his resignation, which caught a lot of folks by surprise and reflected this sort of political backdrop that had been playing out throughout the year, that this is a tough environment for making reasoned, rational arguments against a president who's really kind of leading with his gut. And this really, time and again, seemed to put Arizona as the tip of the spear in what was happening in the policy and politics realm. So I'm going with the senators.
That's three stories, but we'll allow Dustin, what would you say was the biggest story of this year?
I think the biggest one on my plate has clearly been sexual harassment in the state legislature. In October, State Representative Michelle Ugenti-Rita said that she'd been harassed by some male colleagues. She eventually said that one of those colleagues was Representative Don Shooter. And after she came public with that accusation, there was just an avalanche of accusations against Shooter. And that has ballooned into a big investigation. Now both chambers, the Senate and the House, revisiting their harassment policies. Speaker Mesnard, J.D. Mesnard, had originally wanted to wrap up that investigation before the session. That is not going to happen at this point. At most, the investigative report's going to come out, but we're going to head into next year's session with all these accusations looming over both chambers and an investigation that will just be wrapping up.
I think all three stories have one thing in common, wherein it was something that happened each year, but the effects, the reverberations are going to be felt going into next year. But as we look to 2018, give me one prediction of something that's going to happen.
Governor Ducey, in an effort to try to quell some of the criticism on his school funding plan and the teacher raises that are seen as measly by many people, comes up with a plan to pump tens of millions of dollars into education. He will still be criticized for it, but I think he will win his re-election bid.
But what would the dollar figure be really where he wouldn't be criticized?
That's a good question, and that's one that Tower's talking about.
Ron, your prediction for 2018?
So I'm going to go with the Arizona House races. That we have three competitive seats. I think Democrats will sweep all three of those races at this point. If that happens, that will be a net gain for the Democrats of one seat nationally. That gets them one toward the 24 that they need to have to retake the House as a whole. That seat would be the seat currently held by Martha McSally, who appears to be running for the Senate, and that leaves former Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick poised, perhaps, to take that seat back for the Democrats.
With her boots.
With her boots.
I will add, before we get to you, Dustin, I will add my prediction, which is we've already had Trent Frank step away. There will be one more member of Arizona's House delegation who resigns before election 2018. Dustin, what's your prediction?
So in terms of water policy, the governor has been pushing some pretty large reforms to Arizona's just broader water policies. He's been pushing that in a lot of kind of backroom talks this year. But there isn't much traction in either chamber of the legislature to do anything serious, I think, in the next session. So I think we might see some nibbling around the edges, but not the major movement that the governor wants on water.
And before we leave you, what's one memory of reporting, covering what we cover this year that'll stick with you think, for years?
One that definitely stands out in my memory dates back to earlier in the year when I was covering City Hall. Colleague Rob Odell and I had written some stories about lobbyists at the city who were basically flouting the city's rules that require them to register, and as a result of those stories, the city council enacted some rules with much stronger teeth.
Good memory. Ron?
Once again, I'm going to cop to something that I'll stuff under one envelope there. It was the entire year. Every time that we thought you can't top this, you can't barbecue another sacred cow, we just seemed to do that throughout the year. That whether it was firing the FBI director or a no-go zone as it relates to, praising people who are white supremacists, it just seems like throughout the year we just never got off this amazing treadmill that said, if you thought last week was incredible, wait till you see this.
That's 365 stories.
Yeah,
but we'll allow it. Yvonne, what's your prediction?
Well, late one Friday night, I was on the treadmill, and I thought I was about to get off to go to my son's birthday party. And as a hurricane bear down on the United States, President Trump issued a pardon to Joe Arpaio. And I will never forget sitting in the former sheriff's home office after landing an interview with him and asking him if I could see a copy of his pardon. And he could not find it. It took about 5 to 7 minutes of him and his wife looking around the house and, going through their paperwork to see what they did with that very important document.
Interesting. Mine will be peering down from our 9th floor offices during the Trump rally, seeing the crowds not dissipating as that thing wore on and on and on, and knowing something was going to hit the fan, and sure enough it did. Well, that's it for the Gaggle, really, for 2017. We hope we'll see you in 2018.